Hey everybody, it's Pat Jones, and it's time for another TurfZoom brought to you by Aquatrolls. And today's a pretty special one. I got my pal Brian Stiehler here with me from Cashiers, North Carolina at Highlands Country Club. How are you, man?
I'm good. Couldn't be better. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being had. If people don't know you, they've probably not been paying attention because you've contributed a lot. You've contributed mightily in this industry. But I think first things first is tell everybody a little bit about Highlands, and because I visited a couple of times, it's just a really special place.
Yeah.
And so give people a sense for this property that you manage and the culture of the club.
Yeah. So Highlands Country Club is a very unique place, and Highlands in general. So before I get into the club, I just want to talk a little bit about Highlands and what makes this place so special is the natural environment for the most part, and our climate is what's very unique. So we're in Western North Carolina, which is about an hour and a half or an hour west of Asheville. And in fact, it's the part of North Carolina that gets cut off in the atlas. So you look at North Carolina in the atlas, but then you have to go to the back to find like that far part of the state. So, but the unique thing about it is we're very mild. We're at a 4,000 foot elevation in the mountains. So our temperatures are not like what you would be used to in the southeast or what you've experienced in the southeast. We rarely get above the low 80s would be a very hot day. So most of the time we're in the upper 70s. And but the most unique part about Highlands is the amount of rain we get, which is also makes it one of the most challenging things about maintaining a golf course, and that's that we get over 100 inches of rain every year. So as you can imagine, that makes managing a golf course from a number of perspectives, like the disease environment is very conducive. It's like living in a petri dish. And then, of course, just getting daily tasks done, like mowing, can be a challenge too when we get into these really wet times.
You, so
So go
but
ahead.
you've been there long enough. You've come to believe that it's the wettest place in North Carolina. I mean, you
I
might.
think it's one of the wettest places in the country or world for that matter. Yeah, I don't know of any other areas that get more. I'm sure there is some area somewhere that does, but it's definitely unique. So, um,
It's
but
not a
but
competition. So tell me about the club, though.
yeah.
What's it?
So the club then was founded in 1928. It's a Donald Ross course, and one of the cool things about it was Bobby Jones and his father were our founding members. So Bobby Jones hit the first ball off the first tee when we opened in 1928. And so the club, while we always had members. It operated more like a resort until 1980 when it was sold. And when it was sold in 1980 to an outfit in Orlando, they started selling private memberships, and that's when Highlands took off. So Highlands itself came about back in the late 1800s. It was actually a tuberculosis sanatorium. So if you had tuberculosis, you would come to Highlands, and the thought was that the fresh mountain air and the cold mountain air, they would collapse your infected, or they would collapse your healthy lung, and then you were forced to breathe out of your infected lung and you'd live in these like outdoor huts that they just had a roof, no sides. And so that's kind of gives you an idea of it was a health resort. So
How'd that work out for him? How did
yeah.
that play out?
And actually there's still a lot of these huts around here. There's
Yeah,
one, our historical society has a hut, and then also there's more houses in Highlands apparently that were renovated, like people put additions on their house
yeah.
by buying one of those old huts and then just like putting it up as a lean-to and then putting walls around it. So like and I don't know which ones, but I'm told there's like a lot of houses that have those huts kind of incorporated in the structure. But no, so the club was founded in 1928. And but imagine back in 1928 when you had a community like this getting 100 inches of rain per year, and none of the roads were paved. It was all gravel
Right.
roads. So where we're located, we're exactly 10 miles north of the South Carolina border and the Georgia border. So I would say about 60 to 70% of our membership is from Atlanta. So who come up, that's about a 2 hour drive to Atlanta. and they come up on weekends, and then you have a lot of people that just come up here for the summer. So when you think back to Bobby Jones coming up here in 1928, apparently back then it was a 2 or 3 day trip where you stopped off along the way. But the climb from Dillard, Georgia up to Highlands, which is only, I think, 16 miles, I mean, it would have taken a day. And I mean, you got probably 2 or 3,000 feet in elevation change. And then coming up on a gravel road that just has ruts in it from 100 inches of rain. So it must have been pretty unique trying to get here back in those days.
But what struck me in visiting was the members really love the club. They love the environment there and the culture there. It's a little bit of that, I won't say the whole thing, but FIFO thing. They want people to fit in.
Oh yeah, yeah.
They're not all that concerned about whether you're a billionaire or not. They're more concerned of, do you fit in? And I love clubs like that. And it's great that you've established that.
Yeah, and one of the things I thought was interesting, Pat, is what, like when you hear superintendents talk about sustainability, and this was explained to me one time, and I never even thought of it like this. Sustainability can be a million things environmentally, but then it also means like how, as the club, are you tied into the community and how you're part of the community. So when you look around the town of Highlands and you see things like the local library is called the Hudson Library. Well, Scott Hudson was the first president of Highlands Country Club. And then every year we have an event called the Bob Jones Invitational, which is former Walker Cup players playing in a kind of a fun format that raises annually about $300,000 for a local hospital. And that's been going on for years. And so there's so many things that this club is just tied into the community. And actually our rec center in town is called the Jane Woodruff Center, who was a former member of Highlands Country Club. Jane Woodruff, who was Coca-Cola, one of the Coca-Cola family members. And I mean, it goes on and on, where you see the footprint of Highlands Country Club and you see its impact on the town as a whole.
What a cool thing. So you've been there now forever.
Yeah, I've been there. I've been here for 23 years. So I had the privilege. I came here right out of college. So I graduated from Penn State in 2000 and came here that year. In fact, I took my last final, and my wife Hillary and I had our U-Haul truck loaded up, and here we came. So never looked back, and wouldn't change. Wouldn't want to go anywhere else unless I had to.
I feel you. That's a keeper job for sure.
Yeah.
So, but over time, 23 years is a long time in any career, but also a long time as an agronomic trend thing. How has your approach changed over 23 years? Because you talked about the fact that it's pretty wet. You get a lot of disease. You got strange temperatures, and you're kind of isolated up there a little bit too. So you get kind of extremes of weather sometimes. How has that made you change your philosophies about agronomy over the years?
Well, that's a good question. I think that one of the first things I'll say is growing up in Pennsylvania, and that's where I got my first golf course experience. We've had, I was fortunate to work for some good guys, but one of the things I like about a Northeast climate, because we're all bent POA here in Highlands. And one of the things I like about that is a change of season. So you go from like the grind of the summer, and then you go into fall and winter. And so there's like always something new going on. So like when you have the summertime is like our go time, and these seasonal clubs, we're open 8 months of the year, but I guess like a real busy season would probably last about 4 or 5 months. And they pack more into that 5 months than most clubs can pack into 12 months. So it's a hectic time. But then in the off season, we're always doing a lot of renovation work. So the club spends a lot of money on that kind of stuff. They look at the golf course as a priority, and so that it's fun to get that change. So when I look at stuff over the years, I guess that's how I've stayed engaged a lot, is by being able to do new things all the time. I wouldn't do well in a job where it was just the same old all the time. So,
but that's probably forced you to become a good planner in terms of planning that next set of renovations or
absolutely,
new bunkers and things like that. How do you do that? How do you sort of keep on top of that and communicate to your leadership, hey, we're going to have to do these things next year so we can do this in 5 years? How do you get them to buy?
Also, and that's that. So incidentally, planning and organization is probably my strong suit. It's always been one of my strongest attributes. But one of the things that in fact, we just recently did a new one with working with Ron Force is a master plan. So that's kind of where it starts, is with a master plan. And then I'll prioritize those projects and then work with the green committee. So we've got a very active green committee, which is, but in a good sense, active green committee. It's not one that bogs you down in day-to-day stuff. Looking out ahead, and the club's very interested. And that's one of the other unique things about Highlands, that working with some of these people is I've learned so much just by working with some of these people who are like the most successful people in business. And one thing about Highlands is, like, you're required to check your ego at the door. They would, if you had an ego, you wouldn't last long here. So you have these people, and then as employees of the club, we have unique relationships with them that I think at some clubs, at least the clubs that I've experienced, you wouldn't have that opportunity, but you have it here. And I've learned some of like the most, important business and life lessons, and how to be a better superintendent just by watching them, and kind of, it's like the questions they ask, or it's like how they plan, and what the priority is for them. So when you talk about like evolving as a superintendent, I think that's like the biggest thing for me that I've gotten a lot better with. When I was the superintendent here from the age of 25 on. And at 25, I probably wasn't ready for it. I think I obviously did okay, I guess, but like, I think back to 25-year-old Brian, and 25-year-old Brian didn't know anything. And then I look at myself now, and I actually have like the confidence of knowing that like every day I'm like, doing a good job building on something. But back, the 25-year-old Brian was, it was just like any other immature person. Somebody could comment and say, the grass just doesn't look as green today, and I would take it right across the chin, and and that kind of thing. So like, as I've evolved, I've certainly matured, but then also it's like understanding what the priority of the membership is. It's not versus what my priorities are. So there's a big difference there. That's like my biggest advice to young people getting in this profession, is listen to the people that pay your paycheck. Like, actually listen to what they're saying, because you're going to learn a ton, and you're going to stop wasting your time doing stuff that they don't even notice. So that's a big thing
and the other lesson you learned early on was, don't overthink everything. It's just
exactly.
It's not the end of the world. But 25-year-old Brian probably took a while to get comfortable.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So 40-something Brian now, I know, works to do an agronomic plan every year. Yep. And you I know, consult a friend of ours, Mr. Kaminsky, Dr. Kaminsky, and you've got some help on that kind of stuff. How do you then play that out? Where you sit down and say, okay, this is what our expectations are for climate this year. This is what our expectations are for the changes in the golf course. What do we want to do from a product standpoint, or an agronomic standpoint? How does that work?
Yeah, a lot of that is, so again, it's my nature, and this was ingrained in me from probably back when I was 25. The young Brian, our general manager, who I've been fortunate with, so I started the year after our current general manager started. So I've always had a really good relationship with him. And one of the things he always taught me is like, because back 25-year-old Brian, again, if 25-year-old Brian made a mistake, I'd have been pretty upset. And now if I make a mistake, I'm kind of proud of it. It's like, if I'm not making mistakes, I'm not trying new things. I mean, I can go my whole life and never make a mistake, but that's going to be a pretty boring life. And it's going to be one where you never took any chances. So I'm always game to try different things especially, so when I look at things like a fungicide program, and that's where I got Dr. Kaminsky involved, and also consult with like people like Jim Kearns too. Yep. That there's so many different ways to do it, and there's also different ways of thinking, like what the philosophy is. And so in Highlands, knowing the disease pressure we get, like I went through in 2010 was like the year from hell. I blocked that year out of my life, like it never happened. But so like that was an example of a year that if you didn't have all your bases covered perfectly, like you were caught with your pants down, so to speak. I mean, and there's probably half of the superintendents listening to this today know exactly what I'm talking about from that year, because it was awful everywhere. And so especially since that experience, I've gotten so like, I don't know, like I'm just like looking at different products to use and the different modes of action and like what is best to keep me covered at certain times of year, whether it's like pythium root rot, which can be a big issue here, or take all patch. And a
Are
lot of
you
these
are
things.
you a frac guy, or are you focused on having a program that's going to defy resistance for a while, or are you mostly concerned about trying the right thing at the right time?
No, I'm focused on both. I mean, I'm definitely, and that's where the mode of action comes in, and where I'm looking at different, like what's the best way so I don't have resistance issues, but also what is the best way to make me sleep well at night, knowing that I'm covered on all. So that's and so I think that's fun. To me, that's fun. I like working on those types of things. I'm not a shoot from the hip type of a person with anything. So I like planning, and I like having things kind of laid out. And I like writing stuff down. Like I'm a checklist kind of a guy. I've got like 3 calendars on my desk. One's a spray schedule, one's like a personal calendar. And I mean, and one's like an agronomic calendar. It's just fun looking at different ways to do something. All like the agronomic side of the business. Like, how can we do things that maximizes the use of the golf course for the membership, and gives them the golf course for the most time, but still allows us to do the disruption on the greens that we need. And a lot of that requires you to think different than most superintendents do.
Yeah.
There's not just one way to do things, as we all know, and there's different ways to make it work and accomplish the same goals.
Right. And it's some combination of not just the agronomy, but communicating with members and having understanding their expectations and managing those expectations as well. So the other thing that you've been probably far more involved with than most folks is chapter management and chapter leadership. And you went through the chairs of the Carolinas Association and ended up being president during the pandemic. Now, if you're ever going to be president of something, the pandemic could either be the best time or the worst time. How do you feel about that, looking back on that?
I think I was and I'm just saying this based again on what my skill set is. I feel like I was the best person for that job at the right time. Like, I wouldn't wish that upon anybody else. But I did get to be president for 2 years rather than just one. So, but it was a lot of, like, most people look back on it, and I even have some members that like don't understand what all went on then, and they look at they'll look at me and say, well, you got lucky, you really didn't have anything to do. And I was like, holy smokes. Like, and then I think back to what Tim Krieger and I did for a period of a couple of months there, and it was touch and go for a long time. I mean, and I could tell some stories there where we had such that was another very unique thing in the Carolinas. But so grateful for Tim and all the board members I had around me at that time.
Well, and I think your communication skills really were shown through, and that was so important, writing those letters to the members and to the industry, and letting them know what was going on. But I was certainly proud of the job you did. So when young folks say, hey, Brian, should I consider getting involved in my chapter? Do you automatically just say yes, or do you ask them some questions? Do you kind of force them to be thoughtful about it?
That's a good question. I mean, I would emphatically say yes, you need to get involved. But I mean, it does depend on what do you want to get out of it, or what. I think the other thing too is like understanding where you are in your career makes a big difference of like your level of involvement. And having the support of your membership certainly helps. But I mean, I guess my scenario here was, and I've got such a great assistant too, that I was able, just from, there was like that winter or when COVID became a thing. I mean, there was a time for about a month, like I really didn't do anything but work on Carolina stuff, but I mean, obviously here, and the club supported that. Because it was what was good for golf, because what we did in the Carolinas was, and I'll tell you a little story talking about like the communication. We were so fortunate in the Carolina, and I've never told this story before. And Tim Krieger has never told this anyway, so maybe I shouldn't be telling it, but
Oh,
I'll
yes, you
tell it here.
should.
One of the unique things in North Carolina was we had there's a superintendent that's in the Raleigh area, and I won't mention his name, who lives in a neighborhood that with the gentleman that's on Roy Cooper, who's our governor. He's on Roy Cooper's like cabinet, so to speak, and he's over the state police and other things like that. And I don't know his name. I was like
Okay.
purposely didn't want to know his name. And so when things were coming up in as far as golf courses go and the pandemic and shutting down and all this other stuff, Tim and I could write letters and we would give them to this guy who would give them to his neighbor who would give them in the hand of the governor. I mean, it was phenomenal. So I'm so indebted to that superintendent in Raleigh that one day I guess I'll recognize him, but I don't know if he wants that. But I mean, that's huge. I mean, we had and Roy Cooper was like so one of the rumors was, oh, you golf courses, you need to tighten down because so and so was driving by such and such club and they saw two people on a golf cart. And everybody's like, screw that. Nobody, like, that's not real. Well, it was real. I mean, they were really talking about that at that level where they saw some of these golf courses not, following the protocols. And Roy Cooper's, was basically saying, you guys got to get it together or else there's going to be an issue. We can't just like let this go if we're being so strict on everybody else.
But the fact that you were able to have that conversation reflects the fact that you and Tim and dozens of other leaders from the chapter had already had those conversations.
Oh, yeah.
In the 2000s and, leading up to that. And that's when all of that work and the advocacy and the door opening and the visits to the Capitol all paid off. And I think you deserve a lot of credit for that because you were involved with a lot.
Well, yeah, and I've said that before. I don't like it doesn't matter to me who gets credit for what, but I'll say this though, the one thing that I learned from that was all the guys that came before me, whether like the Doug Lowe's and the Brian Powells and all those guys, like I love those guys. And what I love them for is like the amount of work that they did establishing those relationships. And all the times when, at a board meeting where somebody said like, oh, we're having a golf day in North Carolina and we need people to go to it. And everybody would just kind of be like, it's not that big of a deal, or like things like that. And it's like, those guys were committed to it and they went around the, up and down those halls, meeting all these people. And that's what set the stage to be able to deal with what we did during COVID, Yeah. I mean, it was all because of them. It had nothing to do with me. They teed it up for me. They lobbed me a softball, and we, you could just knock it out of the park. But I mean, it was all because of them.
So when you think about the next steps for us as an industry, we've enjoyed this sort of COVID bump. And I think it's for real. I think the work from home thing is a lasting thing. And, you see now Amazon and people trying to bring their workers back but there's a pretty good percentage of our traditionally best customers, the lawyers and the insurance people and all that stuff, who aren't ever going back to an office and are going to play as much golf as they can. Yeah. So here we are with this wonderful problem to have. How do we accommodate all of them? Where do we find the people to help us manage these courses? I think it always comes back to how can we generate more young people into the industry? What kinds of things have you done and what kinds of things have you seen the chapter or your colleagues do that are really kind of working to get young people engaged with golf?
Sure. So one of the things I had back in 2017, and this is kind of where this started, is I was using H-2B visa workers. And long story short, we had a problem where they fell through that year and we didn't get any of the help. So I had to go and I was scrambling for a good bit there. And what I ended up doing is getting a lot of the high school kids from our local Highlands High School and then working them over the summer. And don't get me wrong, like it created its own like set of challenges. Like regardless of who you have working, there's always going to be a set of challenges. So I don't buy into this stuff of, oh, this generation just isn't any good. I think it's just a different it's like a different skill set, and you have to,
Mhm.
as a manager, you have to manage them and lead them in a different way. And but it worked out great, and I think that's like, in my opinion, that's where the future is. And it's even like me. I mean, I started working on a golf course when I was 14, and just like everybody else, I don't think any superintendent out there is sitting here saying that I was looking through the manual of majors at my university and I saw turf grass science or whatever,
Right. Hey,
and
let's do
said, I'll do
that.
that. You know what I mean? Everybody backs into this job somehow. Like, you did it for a summer and you loved it. And so, and that's what I did. And I was so fortunate to have the mentors along the way. But the mentors that I had, one of the things that was really unique, and then that my parents didn't necessarily understand. So my dad's an electrical engineer, and he's very intelligent, but very like the idea of a job in golf course management didn't really excite him. He didn't even think it was possible. But like having the mentors along the way that actually showed me that, hey, you can make a living doing this, and you can make a really good living doing this too, you know. And if you want to do that and make a good living, here are the things you need to do. Here are like people that you need to work with or work for and experience this, and here's how you got to approach your job. And it was like, so I just feel like I had such a good roadmap coming into this, and I think that's what I try to do. So getting these high school kids and showing them that this is actually a job that you can do your entire life.
Yeah.
And I've got two that are considering, they're seniors now, and they're both going to be starting at a turf program in the next year, so that's kind of exciting. But um, I've had a couple that thought they were going to do that, and then I think they saw too much of what I actually do, and then they backed out of it. But so maybe I'm not the best person to ask about that. But no, I'm
Oh,
joking.
well, I don't think that's true. But you know, it really has changed, and I think one of the things that I've consistently heard is, "Hey, do you like working outdoors?" You know,
Yeah,
to begin to kind of parse that, and the outreach programs with FFA and the first green
yeah,
just have been awesome. And so
yeah,
I think we're beginning to do a lot of the right stuff, but we need to tell the story better, and we need to tell a story better to young women,
yes,
and not limit ourselves in that way. Because I remember, I am old, and I do remember these conversations 30 years ago about, well, we need to bring more women in the industry. Well, they can't lift stuff, and
yeah,
you would hear that, or they're just going to go have babies and they won't have the commitment it takes. It was a
yeah,
lot of bull.
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I'm glad to see us beginning to change on that kind of now. So the other thing that you helped to lead, which just blows my mind, that you've carved out time to do this, is your local community. So tell us about your government experience,
Yeah.
foray into politics.
Yeah, so so one thing to take a step back from that though, you got to understand, me personally, and I have a need to always be busy. Like, I don't do well with spare time, so I'm always moving and I need something to do. And back in like so I became the superintendent here in 2004. And so like I was a superintendent for about 3 or 4 years and kind of just got figured out what I was doing. And then at that point, after I was comfortable with what I was doing, I started branching out and I just did a few other things. So, for example, there's a program called Leadership Highlands, and every city has a leadership, or, there's Leadership Atlanta, Leadership, whatever. And so I got involved in that, and I liked it so much that after I got done with that program, they asked me to serve on their like board of governors, and so I did that, and then was president of it. And then I'm a Rotarian, and so I worked my way up. And then in 2012, I was the president of the Highlands Rotary Club. And then we have another organization in town called the Literacy Council, which in Western North Carolina, Southern Appalachia, reading comprehension is kind of an issue. And so
Yep.
we've got an awesome organization that teaches people to read. And they asked me to be involved in that, and I became president of that. And then I became president of our local chamber of commerce. So I was kind of doing all this stuff, and I love doing it because like I get stuff done. That's like like I'm a doer, I get stuff done. So in 2011, it was this kind of natural. I registered to run to get on the our town council, and I won successfully in 2011, and I've since won 3 elections successfully, and I'm up for re-election this year. And I feel like that's not going to be an issue. I ran for mayor unsuccessfully in 2013, but that's a story for another day as far as the lessons learned there. And the lesson is trust your gut and do what you think is right for what you need to do. Don't believe what other people tell you should be doing. So that was a lesson I learned there.
I think the other lesson is none of this stuff is beyond our reach. No matter what we're engaged in, you can always sort of find a way to give back and to contribute. And I'm kind of like you. Boredom is my enemy. I don't do well with boredom, and so you got to kind of keep busy. But do you? I mean, you've learned a lot about networking and about consensus building and stuff.
Absolutely.
That's probably helped you very much in your job.
And vice versa. I think the club politics has taught me more about being a better commissioner than the commissioner has taught me about the club. And really, it's so funny. I mean, like, club politics and town politics are the same thing. The only difference is in the case of the town, your dues are your taxes. And then in the case of the town, you don't have a choice whether you pay those taxes. Where in a club, it's voluntary, of course, and it's your leisure. But everything is the same. I mean, you're trying to, you have revenue and you have expenses and you're trying to balance those. And so, but where I like to get involved is on our recreation committee. So like right now I'm fundraising for a $1.5 million playground that's going to be at our rec center. And then I've also been involved in Highlands has a very unique scholarship program, which every student who graduates from the Highlands School gets a scholarship of some amount, usually a couple $1,000s, to go to college or a trade school. And so I've fundraised for that since 2010. I've raised about $250,000 for that program. So that's what keeps me busy and when I'm not at work.
What a great community. I mean, it's almost like, there was that whole thing of Shangri-La. It was like the mythical city up in the mountains in the Himalayas. And Cashiers feels a little bit like that sometimes. This community really does. So I think it was about 8 years ago that I came to the Carolina show, and I've missed a few, but I've been to a lot. You came to the Carolina show, and you had reached out in advance and said, "Hey, my daughter Anna's coming along, and she was in 8th grade or whatever, 7th grade or whatever it was, and she's kind of interested in writing." And I thought, well, that's a fun idea. Let's give her an assignment. And we had her cover the show. And it was awesome. It was awesome. Yeah. She interviewed Steve Smith and she interviewed Turner Revels and all these great people from the industry. And
she took that so serious.
And she did a great job. And then we published it and everything else. But I got to know this young lady who is now a freshman in college. And I just couldn't be more impressed with her and the job that you and Hillary have done raising her. But I have one question: true or false? You decided to go get a dog because you knew your daughter was going to college and you needed something to take your mind off the anxiety.
That is absolutely 100% true. And he has filled that role. So I've got a border collie that I got from Rebecca. What's her at the Flyaway?
Flyaway Geese.
And Rebecca Gibson. And so, but my dog what makes my dog so special is that he's actually sitting under my desk right now. Okay. I named him Hap Holt. So Hap Holt is the former general manager of the club. That was his last, Mr. Hap. He always went by Mr. Hap. So my dog's name is Hap Holt and he goes by Hap. Gotcha. And he's like kind of like the club's mascot. But the beauty of this dog is he failed out of the goose school. He wasn't much for herding. Like, he's very well trained and he's like the most loyal dog. He's the best dog I've ever had. And I love this dog to pieces. But he didn't make it as he doesn't like geese. He'll run after him, but after he starts taking after him, he really doesn't know what to do. Because I think that's kind of where his training started slipping off. And so Rebecca I was talking to her for like a couple of months before I got him, and I was telling her exactly the type of dog that I was looking for. Like, I didn't need a high octane goose dog because we don't have any geese. Like, we might get like 2 or 3 a year but that's it. So like I didn't want to bring in some dog that was all about geese and then the dog be disappointed because there's nothing to hunt. So, or to run around. So she sent me a picture of this dog and she said, here's one I have that I think will make you an excellent dog. And this was after like talking to her for a couple months. And I was like, the picture, it was like the dog was sitting there with his head tilted and he's got a wonky ear. So the one ear sticks up and the other one hangs down. I was like, right after I saw, I was like, I knew I wanted that dog. So I got him and he just rides around with me all day now. He's the best dog I ever had, best friend I ever had too.
So he's not really a working dog per se.
Well, he thinks he works. He's a hell of a ball chaser.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, that's what he does. And I think he thinks that that's his job too.
Right.
And he's a great swimmer too.
Well, more importantly, has it worked? Has he helped you forget about the fact that your daughter is off at college at the University of North Carolina?
He has. I mean, he has. It's a little, I can focus some energy there. And so Anna, my daughter, she's at Chapel Hill right now, and she loves this dog. So she'll call, a couple times a week. We'll FaceTime at night, and we'll actually put like the iPad up to kind of like near my dog, and then Hap sees her and gets all excited, and she cries a little bit. So
she's FaceTiming with the dog. That's
yeah.
I love that.
She's so smart. Yeah.
Well, I'm happy for you, but I'm also very happy for her. And I think she's going to be successful in whatever she chooses to do. Is she going to try to play golf at the collegiate level?
No, she's not playing golf. She's focused on her sorority. That her sorority is a big deal. And her she's majoring in political science and she wants to go to law school. So that's where she's at.
Good Lord. Don't let her do that. Please.
Well, she wants to get into family law and do help with adoptions and that kind of thing.
Okay. I respect her decision because I know her and she's a smart young lady.
But she's so smart. She'll do whatever she wants to do.
So, you've been in a position between your leadership roles at the chapter and really being close with people at key courses around the country. What do you think the future looks like now? I mean, we've gone through this amazing kind of growth thing. I never saw it coming. I don't know about you. I never saw this re-emergence of rounds. I really kind of thought we were going to continue to shrink, and I was a little bit optimistic about kids and women playing more, but this blew my mind. And so now here we are. What do you think the future looks like? And a question I always ask is, how can we screw it up?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, that's a good question. I think, here's one example too, that I think, like when I look at back when I got in the business and what it's like now, I was helping one of our PGA interns that Methodist University is in North Carolina. I think it's in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And every year our head golf professional gets a student or two from there for an internship. And part of their education is there's like a turf management component of it. And so there's like a questionnaire they have to work with the superintendent about answering. And it's funny to me, like all of the questions on it it's 100% environmental stuff, which is good and bad. I mean, one is that's obviously a huge part of our job, but I feel like it's almost gone too far where it's like people, that's all they think we worry about is the environment, when there's like so many other aspects of this job other than the environment, that you're dealing with, whether it's like the HR or the, shoot, you could go on and on and on. But so I think that's kind of ironic that, or not ironic, but I mean, I think as time goes on, that's just going to become more and more important. Like when people say like water is going to be the biggest, biggest issue in golf for 10 years from now. And I don't doubt that, but I think our roles as superintendents are just going to be looked at as more as an environmentalist and conservationist in that term. And I think that's good because I think that ultimately will give a boost in the superintendent image maybe. But I don't know. I think we've come a long way, and I think superintendents are looked at more. I think in a way, an argument could be made that at the right club, a superintendent is valued more than even a golf professional would be. 20 years ago, would anybody have said that? Probably not. I don't know, but I think that's the case. And
It's changed, and frankly, beginning to see salaries reflect that, which is
Yeah.
good. But I do think that the superintendent's role as a steward of the club, and I say that in the broader sense of not just the environment, but what does the club look like 50 years from now? What are we going to do to make sure that we've done the right things to keep the infrastructure the way it
Sure.
needs to be? So the kind of boring part of what we think about when we think about golf is that infrastructure stuff and all the irrigation systems and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. So I'm optimistic about the future, particularly for superintendents as stewards and land managers, because I think that's a role that will never change,
Yeah.
and is the most important role that's out there.
Yeah.
So when you just to kind of wrap this up, when you think about your time and 23 years there and your involvement and everything else, what's the one most important thing that you've kind of learned along the way that you want to pass along to the folks who watch this? And presumably maybe some of them will be a little younger and they're looking for some advice. What's the one thing you want to make sure everybody remembers about you?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, I mean, for me personally, what's important for me is being plugged in tune and engaged in the community. And that's different. I understand that, like, if you live in a bigger city versus a small town, it's obviously easier to get engaged in things that are happening in a small town. But, I always want to be like remembered for that. But as far as the golf course superintendent and my like kind of advice for younger people is, like I've got a sign out front that just says like, basically we're never satisfied and we're never finished, and it's like that's the attitude I want me and I want all my guys to come in with every day, because the reality of it is, I mean, they could replace me with somebody that would do as good, or hell, you never know, maybe they do a better job. But what I want to look at it is every day we came here and we showed our value and we didn't take anything for granted, and that we continued pushing and pushing to make this place the bet is better. Like, I don't, one of the best compliments that I get from members, because again, you got to remember it's seasonal, so they'll leave here in the winter and then come back in the spring and go to, this is like a second and third club for a lot of people. They'll go back home and they come back and they'll say like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how much stuff you've got done. And this is it's so different. It looks so much better if you whatever, because we cleaned some area out. I always want that to be the case where they come back and it's better than when they left.
Yeah.
And so over time, if somebody ever left and they came back and thought that wasn't the case, that's the year that I need to check out, because that's when, I don't, if I'm ever, I don't know, complacency and Brian don't like go hand in hand. But if I ever did become complacent, that's the end of my career. I'd rather retire and not than do it. So just keep pushing and realize it's, one of the things, like the perfection part of it. I think perfection depends on like where you're at. Like every course has their own form of what perfection is, but like you're always trying to achieve it. You never get there. And if you think you've gotten there, then again, it's like takes the fun out of it. But just you have to have that attitude in this business, and you have to let the people that you work for know that you have that attitude. So however you do that, if that's like, so like I maintain a blog, and again, one of my hopes is that any member that reads that blog walks away from that and says, God, this guy loves Highlands Country Club and he's all about Highlands Country Club. Even if for that day I don't feel like it, but that's the way I want it to come across.
Yeah.
And that's what I think, to be successful in this business, that's how you have to be. I don't think you can be any other way.
And it's also, though, kind of a flashing red light in the rearview mirror. And our friend Armin Sooney, another Penn State or Pennsylvania guy, he told me one time that if you get to the point in your career where you're walking by something that probably needs work and you ignore it versus jumping on it, that it's time to think about moving on.
Yeah, exactly. He told me that one time. I think he said, it's like if you drive by something that 10 years ago you would have stopped and picked up or done something different, and you're not doing it now, then it's time to evaluate where you're at.
Well, I think you're at a pretty good place, and I'm honored to call you a friend, and I'm delighted at all the success you've had. And I know that people, if they have questions or would like to find out more about how you do things
Yeah.
at Highlands can reach out to you. But I just want to say thanks on behalf of myself and the nice folks from Aquatrolls who make this possible. And I can't wait to come down and visit again soon.
Yeah, you're welcome anytime. And again, I thank you. It's always fun catching up with you.
Yeah, it was great. And y'all out there, y'all stay tuned because we're going
And
to
I
keep.
look forward to seeing pictures of you and the grandkids on.
Oh, see, you couldn't stop. No, that's some, maybe you have that in your future, but yeah, grandparenting is far better than parenting. It's way more fun. So we'll all enjoy that someday, I hope.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much,
Thanks,
Pat.
man. See you again soon.
All right. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.